Well, Cubeworld just kinda came back out of nowhere, didn't it? I mean, WOLLAY's been posting updates on his Twitter every now and again, so we knew it was still in development, but then out of the blue he was just like, fuck it, releases in a month. The return of Cubeworld was met with universal joy and excitement. It had been in development hell for 6 years, and this game that we'd spent so much time playing in alpha was finally getting its full release, and we were excited as heck. However, once alpha players got their hands on the Steam beta, the cracks started to form. Rumours of a different leveling system along with region-locked items and gear, and, well, they were true. While this game now has some unique and fresh concepts, it has introduced mechanics that don't really work together, and has steered the game off the course from what it originally was, a world with infinite progression. And while I don't think that this game is terrible, I can understand why some people, especially those that have been waiting for over 6 years for this moment, are so disappointed with what this game has become. If you've never played the original alpha version of Cubeworld from 2013, I would encourage you to watch the video I made about it almost exactly a year ago, perhaps to get some more context when I compare it to the 1.0. In short, it was a game with infinite progression and an infinite world. Bare bones, yes, but still engaging enough for players such as myself to be sinking 50 hours plus into it, no worries. I'd like to start by saying that the first 5 hours or so of this game are great. It has a brilliant sense of progression as you get better gear and equipment, allowing you to take on more challenging enemies and locations until you've got 5-star gear and are ready to find your first artifact. The way that you unlock better equipment is clever as well, collecting books that allow you to craft better gear, rescuing gnomes to allow better gear to be sold in town, using your special equipment to find some nice gear as treasure. You're not just grinding mobs anymore, and it all works really well for, again, I'd say about 5 hours. Eventually, you'll have all the best gear, maybe found your first artifact, and have discovered enough lore to see where more are hidden, likely in another region of the map. But as soon as you cross that border, everything you just worked for is gone. While the world was always split up into different regions in the alpha, albeit much larger, equipment is now also locked to them, with the only exception being rarely found plus equipment which can be used to full effect in neighbouring regions. When I say locked, I mean that 5-star equipment in one area will be worse than 1-star equipment in the next. It's like the start of Castlevania Symphony of the Night when you're OP as frick, just killing everything in one hit, and then death takes all your stuff, and then you're a little bitch. What this means is that when you move to a different region of the map, you will basically start from scratch all over again, as your combat stats are entirely based on equipment and equipment only. Leveling up has nothing to do with how strong you are. Not only that, but you'll lose all of your special equipment such as your hang glider, boat, and reins to ride your pet, which I personally think is a terrible design choice. Going to new regions should allow you to get more upgrades for your equipment. It shouldn't just take them off you and then tell you to find them again. It just doesn't make sense. Why does my boat only work in this area? Why does it just disappear when I cross this ambiguous border? Why are you actively discouraging me from exploring this new area in a game that encourages exploration? Leveling up is also no longer tied to XP from killing mobs, but rather to how many artifacts you have found. Originally, I was a lot more skeptical about this, but I actually think it's a neat mechanic. It provides a genuine alternative to simply grinding mobs over and over to get stronger, and gives the exploration factor of the game more purpose. However, the actual benefits from leveling up are so slight that there's almost no real point to it. All it will do is very slightly increase something to do with movement speed or stamina drain for a certain activity, which half of the time isn't available anyway because you'll be in a new region where you haven't found the right equipment for it yet. A big issue with this progression system is that it doesn't feel like you're progressing. Where the alpha had indefinite level scaling, in this release you'll more than likely face a 5-star enemy within the first 5 odd hours of gameplay. And that's it. They don't get any harder than that. And because the bonuses from leveling up and from artifacts themselves are so inconsequential, it feels more like you're just collecting trophies rather than actually getting stronger. So when you've cleared out the region you started in, you might as well be starting a new game. It's less of an endless road of progression as it is an endless trophy hunt. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a clever and certainly very unique system, but I don't think that it has been executed particularly well, especially when this game was always originally about having limitless progression, whether by gear or by level. Cubeworld has always had an emphasis on exploration, and the 1.0 has some mechanics that work for it and some that don't. For example, NPCs can now give you clues on where to find certain items and reveal locations on your map for you, which is something that really works for this game and actually gives town NPCs other than shopkeepers a purpose. The lore system is also a great mechanic. You'll find little tidbits around the map on altars or these big phallic rocks, and if you actually get 100% lore for a realm, it will reveal the location of artifacts on the map, which again actually encourages you to explore. Note that realms and map regions are separate things as far as lore is concerned. Realm lore is often spread across multiple map regions, which poses a problem when your equipment becomes complete arse as soon as you cross that border. Locking equipment to regions does not encourage exploration, but rather restricts you to each section, and each region is pretty damn small too. Not to mention that, once again, it will take away all the stuff that you'll use to actually traverse the landscape. I mean, what's gonna make you want to explore an ocean region if you don't get to keep your fucking boat? And then the map is also just totally revealed from the start. What's the sense in that? Are we exploring or are we just using Google Maps? You can now just scour the map for each region and place down markers for each location or structure on the map, which isn't really, you know, exploring. The combat is still much the same as the alpha, which is good, because Cuboid's combat has always been great. It's challenging enough to keep it exciting, and it allows a skilled player to take on enemies that might normally be considered too high level to defeat. You've got the 4 main classes, Warrior, Mage, Ranger and Rogue, each with its own 2 subclasses, which now has to be changed in town rather than on the fly, each with their own distinct perks and abilities. However, there is still a massive class imbalance in this game, and the easiest place to see it is with the bosses. Mage bosses are by far the most difficult, where Warrior bosses are all incredibly easy, and the imbalance is the same for the player too. As they were in Alpha, Mages are still the most powerful class, especially when it comes to PvE. When there's distance between you and your enemy, half of the time you can severely damage them before they even get to you, and Mages still have incredible crowd control ability. Another criticism I have of the combat, particularly the boss fights, is that you can cheese them a little too easily, especially the arena fights. This is usually again made possible by being a ranged class, showing further how much of an advantage having ranged attacks gives you. Bosses also still feel like they're just regular enemies but bigger and with more health. While they certainly normally have one extra special attack on top of what they normally have, they can certainly still be a lot more interesting and unique. Skill trees have also been completely removed from the game, which seems an odd choice. All abilities are just unlocked from the start, which I suppose makes up for it, but keeping skill trees and having them tied to collecting artifacts may have actually made leveling up feel like a progression rather than just a treasure hunt. Death is still just as inconsequential as it was in the alpha as well. You won't lose anything and you'll just be taken back to the nearest shrine. The only difference being now you have to activate them, which isn't so much a problem considering that you can just scout them out on the map. The game also allows you to just fast travel the shrines you've activated, which I think totally negates the existence of the day-night cycle. In Alpha it sort of acted as a way to prevent you from straying too far away from town and getting caught out in the dark, but now you can just teleport back to town when needed. Especially since nothing changes at night other than the fact that it's dark. It'd be more threatening if more challenging enemies came out at night to dissuade you from getting caught out, but now it's simply an inconvenience, meaning you'll have to teleport back to pass the time via an inn. Back to the fast traveling, I think that it's a convenient feature, but it also takes away from the importance of movement speed, which is a problem when that's the only benefit you get from leveling up. Most of the special equipment was intuitive enough and you knew what to do with it to progress or access extra areas and treasure. However, when I got the Spirit Bell, I didn't really know I could use it to pass through grates on treasure buildings, as the message I got when I obtained it was something along the lines of, "Ooh, spooky spirit world time." Again, to draw a far-reaching comparison to Symphony of the Night, could it not have just been an ability to simply pass through the grate, rather than having an entire minute cooldown that makes everything go all dark, without any way to cancel it? You know, like the rest of the special equipment in the game? The placement of the special equipment on the map was also a bastard sometimes, like one of the spirit bells which was placed inside the volcano for me. Also, for one region I had to swim out to an island in order to get the boat for the rest of the area. What kind of a sick prank is that? The game was still a little bit buggy too. Sometimes lore tablets would half spawn in a wall and couldn't be activated, sometimes enemy spawns could prove a little problematic, and sometimes treasure doors just wouldn't open. You still have the option to tame pets, and there are more to tame as well as more that are actually rideable. I'd have been surprised to see this feature removed, but I would have also liked to have seen it be fleshed out. Because at the moment it's just, yeah, I have a pet. A pet that half the time I can't even fucking ride anyway. I'm glad that they've kept the weapon customization in the game as well, but it's been dumbed down since the alpha, most notably due to the removal of spirit cubes. It's still a nice feature, but I found myself not really using it, especially since I didn't bother syncing any customization into legendary weapons when they just become useless shortly after anyway. Despite being one of those games that was quite shamelessly inspired by Minecraft, Cube World's art style has always been one of the things going for it. The world gen was always nice, as were the player and enemy models, and they were all fitting for the kind of genre and atmosphere it set. The world gen is certainly improved in 1.0, more so when it comes to structures, both natural and unnatural. There's a lot more spectacle to the landscape, which is great when it comes to a game about exploration. Dungeons in particular are a lot more interesting now and have a much more varied layout. I still would have liked to seen a few more different types of dungeons, but there's certainly an improvement on the dungeons from Alpha. The map UI is great, probably a little better than it was before, which is a good thing because you'll be spending quite a lot of time looking at it. As previously mentioned, the change that I think is detrimental to the premise of the game was to reveal the entire map from the get-go. In the alpha, you'd have to actually explore the map to reveal it, which in a game about exploration makes sense. Music is something that was badly missing from this game in alpha, and it's a very welcome addition in this new release. I don't know why the option to have it loop is off by default though. It's an RPG, it's much better with music. I'm glad that the original art direction was not changed for the new release and that the game's mood has been enhanced with the addition of music, but while the game is still aesthetically pleasing, the overall gameplay changes are something that simply cannot be overlooked. Instead of letting you grow stronger and stronger as the world around you scales exponentially, you'll get as strong as you can get, lose all your stuff, and then do it again. The game has already thrown everything it has to throw at you within 10 hours. So what's the appeal in playing for longer? Just as I ended my original video, Cube World has that something special when you first play it. It charms you, draws you in with its gameplay, until you realize not that it's unfinished, but that you're not really getting anywhere. The game simply gets far too repetitive, and don't get me wrong, RPGs are known to be repetitive and grindy, but Cube World is now more or less a copy-pasted sequence over and over and over again. Get the gear, find the lore, grab the artifacts, all of that with basically no genuine progression. And that's the big issue. In the alpha, this game boasted what was genuinely limitless progression. Even if it was bare bones, there really wasn't an end to it. And while there's technically not an end to this, it feels as though you've completed the game after your first region, and you're just restarting when you go to the next. Those first 5, maybe 10 hours or so are once again magical, but you'll notice that you've realistically already faced the hardest enemy, already cleared the hardest dungeon, and now you'll just do it again, albeit with a palette swap in a different biome. Perhaps this game will appeal to certain kinds of people, those who like the 100% games or just want some Indiana Jones style treasure hunting action. But those of us who are attracted to Cube World's premise of an infinite world with endless progression will undoubtedly feel disappointed. Plus, they didn't even add a playable Wooper race, not even like axolotl people or anything, which is frankly more unforgivable than the rest of the changes made. What I think really hurt this game's release is the fact that it was in development hell for so long and that it was only realistically one person working on it. Perhaps if WOLLAY had the proper development team, or even if it remained in public early access during this time, the game could have been steered in the right direction. I don't think that Cube World 1.0 is a bad game, I just don't think that it's particularly great either. It's a game with some neat ideas, but ideas that don't all work together. It's got some cool mechanics, but these mechanics don't all complement the kind of game that it wants to be. Or maybe they don't complement the kind of game that we wanted. I think that a big reason for the backlash against Cube World is that when you compare it to the alpha release, it isn't quite the game that it was all originally cracked up to be. I think that if this game was never released in early alpha all those years ago and we'd only really heard about it as it launched, it would not be receiving anywhere near as much criticism as it is. But in the end, what the consumer wants is what matters, and Cube World doesn't necessarily fall short of where we were hoping it would land, but rather appears to have overshot and missed the mark completely.